Good evening. My name is Nicole. I'm a Ventura County Master Gardener, and this program is part of our Master Gardener Fall Series. Tonight, the talk is sponsored by Callegas Municipal Water District. Today's presentation, Caring for Your Landscape in a Drought, will be about an hour with time for questions. Our speaker today is Dani Brusius. She is a sustainable landscape expert with training in firescaping, arboriculture, plant biology, soils, garden pests, and diseases. In 2005, Dani graduated from the Master Gardener program and has over a decade of training and community service at our helpline desk. Tonight, you will learn how to care for your shrubs, trees, and other landscaping in this water-challenged time. Learn what to plant, when to plant, what plants are water divas. Learn the importance of soil, microclimates, hydrozones, mulch, and irrigation. Here's Dani.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. This is something that's pretty near and dear to my heart, is caring for your landscape, because we're going through times now that we haven't been through before. Okay, so on to the talk on caring for your landscape during drought. These are the things I'm going to cover. First of all, the important thing is keeping your trees alive. Your food is important, and trees are important, and those are probably the most important things in the landscape. So these are all the things that your trees can do for the environment. And I'd like to focus on cooling the environment, because trees, even if you're in an urban area with a lot of asphalt, the trees are going to definitely cool the environment. Like shaded asphalt is usually 60 degrees cooler than asphalt in the sun. And know that asphalt in the sun can actually burn your pet's paws within a minute. And they do all these other great things, and they make us happier. And that's a science thing. That's a scientific proven thing, that they do make us happier. They reduce stress. So if you have trees in your yard and you're concerned about, what the requirements are, what kind of trees they are, what the water requirements and things are, Cal Poly has a great site on trees. It's called Select Tree. And this is good also if you're looking to plant trees. So when's a good time to plant trees? Today. Today is a great time to plant trees, or at least before the cool days are over. So on the Select Tree site, you can find trees that you want, or you can just look up trees that you may have. And I did include pictures, but there's a lot of great pictures on this site too, that show you the bark, the leaves, and the full trees and the canopies, etc. So I pulled this one up about the European white birch, because this is a tree that we have a lot of that was planted in the 80s. And if you look, it says the Select Tree water usage rating is high for these trees. And that's a good reason that these trees aren't doing really good right now. So if you have a tree like a birch tree that isn't doing real good right now, you might want to consider putting in something else that's going to do better in our changing climate and during drought times. So on to using water wisely. So if you're going to plant new trees, they need frequent water for the first 3 to 6 months. They need most of the water in spring and summer. They should be irrigated in early morning and never at the trunk, because when you water a tree at the trunk, when that area stays damp, what happens is it invites a lot of diseases and things like that. So, okay, water your trees separately from turf. The trees that get a little bit of water throughout the, like maybe 3 times a week or whatever, they're not going to root as deeply. And then you run into problems like this. The grass, to keep your grass and ground covers nice and green, You're going to have to water them more often. Trees, not so much, especially established trees. If you have older established trees that have been there for a while, they're going to thrive on deep watering and not this maybe a couple times a week shallow watering. So if you do have trees that have been getting water from lawn areas, you might have to wean them off slowly with a weekly irrigation. Okay, so late summer is a good time to deep water your trees. Oh, that's my ice maker. Late summer is a good time to deep water your trees. So, you know, you might think that, okay, now it's fall and it's cooler and you don't think so much about your trees, but they've been stressed for a long time. They've had a long summer with not a lot of water. So if you haven't deep watered your trees since the end of summer, now's a good time to do it because they've got all this stress that's been building. So know the signs of stress on your trees. The signs are wilt, sunburn, color change, dulling foliage, smaller and fewer leaves, and leaf drop. And for leaf drop, the sycamore is a pretty adaptive tree. And I'd like to call it the drama queen of the tree species, because it will drop its leaves when it gets too hot. It will drop its leaves when it gets too cold. It will drop its leaves when it gets real windy. And that's because it's saving energy. So that is a sign right there, is leaf drop. So what is deep watering? Okay, so most trees absorbing roots are within the top 24 inches of soil. So if you check the top 12 inches, it's probably going to let you know if you have to water again. Nobody's going to go out there and dig down 2-3 feet to see if the soil is still moist. So usually you get those moisture meters, I think they're 8 inches or so. That's usually a good sign to tell if your trees need to be watered. So how can I tell if the soil is dry? You can purchase moisture meters or probes. And I included this guy here because that's the $400 moisture meter. You don't need the $400 moisture meter. Or you can do what I do. I go to items around the house. So when you insert a probe into the ground, when you feel resistance, you know that you've reached dry soil or maybe a rock. So you want to do it in more than one place. And I recently added this guy here, the arrow, because I don't know if it's what my neighbors think about me, but I found an arrow in my backyard. Somebody shot an arrow into my backyard and it's perfect. It's stiff. It's maybe 18 inches long and it's the perfect probe to check the soil. So when you do irrigate your trees, you're going to want to irrigate under the canopy and be on the drip line, okay, and not at the trunk. So you're going to water deep, 2 to 3 feet. And here's where the absorbing roots are, and here's the canopy. So irrigate the shaded area, wide but not at the crown. And you might wonder how far do the roots on your tree go? So if you take a tree's height and you take that distance 1 and maybe 1.5 times from the tree, that's how far out the roots are going to go. And they're not going to go in a perfect circle around. They might all go one way or they might all go the other way. You know, maybe your HOA water's over here, so they're all going that way. So, you know, you can't really tell. They're not going to be perfect like this, but this is where you're going to water. So now watering your trees, the California Center for Urban Horticulture at UC Davis realized that keeping your trees watered was an issue. So what they devised was a tree ring irrigation contraption. And it's not something that you go out and purchase, but it's a list of parts that you need to irrigate your trees. And what is wrong with this picture here? Okay, you don't want grass underneath your tree. Okay, you want to go out. We go back, let me see if I can go back. Okay, if we go back to this picture, all this area, you're not going to want You're not going to want other things growing in there because it's just going to be competing with the water for your tree. And also note, if you put something like a mulch in there, your tree's going to stand out better. It's going to look better than being surrounded by grass. So here, I'm hoping that they just left the grass here so you could see the lines. I don't know if that was their idea. But anyway, so the parts for this, it's kind of expensive. If you have 1 or 2 trees, it's not so bad. I think it costs around $100 for the parts. But if I have a small yard and I have 14 trees, this is going to get kind of expensive. And they realize this. So what they did was they came up with the RSIC, not such a great acronym as the trick, but I guess it works. It's the rotary system irrigation contraption, and it's just 5 parts. Yeah, 5 parts. You attach it to the hose. Runs $15 to $20 for the parts. You only need 1 because you're going to move it around to your different trees, but your work is involved there instead of with the trick, which you would leave alone. Because like I said before, you're not going to water at the trunk. So each tree, you're going to have to move this when you water. And it's, like I said, it's just a rotary head on a stake on your hose. Okay, so if you are removing a lawn, because a lot of people are removing their lawns now, just try and be careful not to damage the roots of the trees. And if you're removing other plants, know that sunburn can be a problem on your plants. So try and keep the sun exposure to a minimum. And fruit trees, most of us have fruit trees, and know that you might have to forego a crop to save your trees. It's not going to kill your trees. But you might not get the fruit. Peaches and plums require ample water 4 to 6 weeks before harvest. And citrus need water in the spring to set fruit and steady water in the summer and fall to produce acceptable size and numbers. Right now, my navel orange tree has acceptable size, but I think I'm going to get about a half a dozen orange trees this year, oranges this year off the tree. So on to soil. Okay, I'm adding soil in here because that's really important for how you water. Soil is important in a lot of ways. Your soil is alive, and your soil actually sequesters more CO2 than all the plants on Earth. So you want to keep your soil healthy. You want to keep your soil alive. And the ideal soil is rare. So to irrigate efficiently, you really have to know your soil. And what I like about this picture here is that if this is a piece of sand at this scale, clay is so small that it would be totally invisible. Okay, this is your soil texture. There's a lot to know about soil. I'm just going to talk a little bit about your texture and how it works with irrigation. Okay, so what kind of soil do you have? Okay. The science loves triangles, and this is the texture triangle for soil. Okay, and but this is all you really need here. It tells you that silt, sand, and clay mixed together. If it's perfect, you get a loam in the middle. So sand feels coarse and gritty, so you're going to have to irrigate more frequently because the water's going to run through the sand faster. And clay, so many people, everybody hates their clay soil, but now is the time to love your clay soil because clay is going to do better in a drought. Clay holds on to the water longer. Okay, clay feels sticky when wet, and something that they're now calling it pulse watering. So with clay soil, you might have to pulse water, which is water it for a few minutes, let it sink in, and water it for a few minutes and let it sink in. And loam, we'll just skip that. No one's got a perfect loam. So this is how water moves through your soil. So if you have sandy soil, you see it runs straight down and it runs down a lot faster. Clay soil spreads out more and it goes down a lot more slowly. So say you're switching out to a drip irrigation system and you have a plant that's right here. If you have sandy soil, you might have to put 2 different emitters on there. Where if your plant is here and you have clay soil, you might be fine with 1 emitter because it's going to spread out more because you're going to want to water the roots on both sides all around the plant. So if you're still confused about your soil type, I'm sending you to a lot of different places. California Soil Resource Lab, which is a great site. It used to be that you'd go to the library and you'd get these big maps and you'd have to lay them out on tables to find out what your soil survey was like. Now it's all online. It's easy to access. Your soil might be a little bit different because we all live in areas where like they brought in different soil, or maybe you've been living in your place for 30 years and you keep on adding organic matter. So it's got a lot more organic matter in it. So it's just an idea to get you started, but the site itself has a lot of good information. For instance, I live in Oak Park and I found out that we're heavy in avocado root rots. And if you look around Oak Park, you will see that I know of 2 avocado trees, period. And if you go to Ventura, they grow on the freeway off ramps by themselves with nobody helping. So on to microclimates and hydrozones. Okay, I'm checking time. Get to know your yard. So spend time in your yard, move it around so the better you know your yard, the better your results are going to be. So with microclimates, what's going to make a difference in your microclimates are you'll have sunny areas, maybe you'll have shady areas, windy areas, areas that stay wet. And the compass direction is a big deal. So if you have like slopes that are faced south, they're going to dry out a lot faster. So even if you have like the small yard like I do, I've got a lot of different microclimates in my yard. So know that areas by walkways and streets are going to dry out faster. So this is where you're going to want your super drought tolerant plants. This is a ceanothus. This one is a conejo buckwheat. This is the conejo buckwheat in bloom. And this is a woolly blue curls. And these are all plants that don't like summer water. So how much more perfect can you get with our drought conditions and things that don't like to be watered during the summer? But know too, if you go with these plants and we're in drought in the fall and winter time and you go with native plants, you're going to have to water them during those times because that's when they usually require water. So, and I love this picture. This is the landscape hack if you live by a school and don't want drop-offs. Know that most cities have regulations on what you put in this little strip. I don't know what they call it here, but we are unincorporated, so I don't think they pay as much attention to us here. So if you have an area that gets low or moderate amount of water, this is what we did with our lawn. We switched it to a meadow area. Okay, and no, this is in spring, and this is really amazing to me. But and most of it's a few plants, and it's a lot of meadow seed mixes. But know that unlike grass, this isn't what your yard is going to look like year round. Okay, this is what it looks like in the middle of summer. It's not great, but it's not bad either. And this is the picture that I just took this last week. This is a picture in fall. And basically I have plants here, like this is the deer grass. And I live in a WUI, which is a wildland urban interface. So if you live in an area that's prone to fire, know that some of these plants are very fire prone. So my deer grass, all my grasses, everything gets cut down in September. I haven't gotten to this guy yet, but everything usually gets cut down in September and October before the Santa Anas come because of fire. And then it all comes back, and it's come spring, it's like the first picture again. So now you sat in your yard. Sketching out your yard's a great thing to decide, what your hydrozones are. I like this sketch because here they included the nice view of the sunset. And think about that too when you're out in your yard. If you've got an area that's got a nice view, you might want to maybe hardscape it or put some pavers in or something, and throw a bistro table out there, and that's where you're going to sit in the morning and have your coffee or whatever. You don't have to have everything covered with plants. So on to hydrozones. Excuse me. Okay, hydrozone works by using your microclimates that we just talked about to group plants with similar water needs. So what are the water needs of my plants? Here's another great site. I'm going to send you away to all of these sites without really teaching you. The Wukol site is something that would have been when we redid our yard, that would have been great because a lot of our plants ended up going to the compost pile. Wukols, they got together the nursery people, the professionals, the teachers, the people from UC Davis. They all got together and hashed out what plants needed how much water. And before this, it was all pretty much hearsay. So this is a site you go to, and you can break down your plants by, you can look up certain plants if you want, or you can, if you're redoing your yard, you can look up, like you want ground covers, or you want native plants, or you want trees. There's all different ways that you can find plants in here. And what I did with this, I did this for Oxnard, and I just put in three requirements: very low, low, and moderate water. And I came up with 2,549 different plants. And when you go into this site, it's there's more pictures than there used to be. Not everything has pictures, but it's got all the information, the water use, the types of plants that they are, how big they get, the sun needs and everything like that. It's got all the information on your plants. And then there's Calscape. So if you're planning on going native, Calscape, it's another interactive site that you can go to, because California is a huge state. And just because a plant is a native doesn't mean that it's going to work in your yard, because we've got everything from the Sierras to the coast. So try and stick as close to your plant community. And that's what this map lets you do. They have 7,985 plants that are native to California, and they have amazing pictures with them too. Also, they have a little down here at the bottom, they have, what do they call it? The garden planner, the Calscape garden planner that you can type, that you can try. And basically you just they ask you 4 different questions, and it's going to give you plant lists, and it's even shows you some design ideas too. And when I did this, I picked out water saving, pollinator, and birds. So don't be afraid to remove plants that aren't performing. So anything that you're particularly attached to can stay, but these plants have been adapted to copious amounts of water. And if it requires a lot of water, let it go. They are plants, not your children. I have a Nandina that I recently removed because, it was doing fine, but I wanted to save the water for something that I really loved. Okay, mulch. This is, mulch is important. And I learned a little bit about mulch recently too, that I'll pass on. So what is mulch? Mulch is a protective cover that you put on top of the soil. And it could be a variety of things. It's just, you don't work it in, you put it on top of the soil. And organic mulches, I have to change this part about breaking down. Organic mulches are like the shredded bark and wood chips. And when they break down, they add soil improving properties. Well, know that if you go with bark, okay, probably the best one is going to be wood. Because if you go with bark, what is bark? Bark is the outside of the tree, okay? It's not living, it's the protector. It's the hard part that's going to take a really long time to break down. So if you have bark mulch, it's not going to break down as fast as, say, a wood mulch that you get from the chippers, from the tree chippers. That's probably the best stuff that you can use. And so when these break down, they add soil improving properties. You can also use inorganic mulches such as rocks and gravel and things like that. And they're not going to break down and improve your soil, but they're going to protect your soil. And if you remember the picture that I showed of my yard, the mulch had been replaced with, the wood mulch was replaced with rocks. And I did that because, once again, I'm in a WUI, a wildland urban interface, and they don't want you to have anything that will burn within 5 feet of structures. So anything that was within 5 feet of the house, I replaced the mulch and used the rock mulch, and it's doing fine. So this is huge. Mulching can result in a 10 to 50% reduction in moisture loss from evaporation. So you're saving a lot of water there by mulching. Covered soil reduces erosion and runoff. It reduces weeds and makes them easier to pull. Now know that weed blocks usually aren't recommended or required because what happens with a weed block, well, first of all, if you use the organic mulches or the wood chips and things like that, if they're not going to break down into your soil because you've got a layer there. The other thing is weeds have these little caps on their roots that are really strong, and they will go straight through that fabric. And what happens is it makes it really hard. Once you acquire a little bit of debris on top of that layer and you get weed seeds in there and the weeds grow, they're going to be a lot harder to pull if you've got a weed block. Mulch moderates soil temperature and increases water infiltration. So go crazy with your mulch. 4 to 6 inches is fine. If you live in a WUI, there's that word again. If you live in a WUI, I'd suggest not going any deeper than 3 inches. And make sure to keep the mulch away from the base of trees and shrubs, just like not keeping that area damp, because what's going to happen if you have mulch up to the base of the trees, that area is going to stay damp and it's going to invite lots of little nasty diseases and stuff. So, we've got plenty of time. So on to irrigation. Okay, so most of your systems can be adapted to incorporate a drip system without changing everything out. You might think, oh, this is going to be terrible. I have to change out my whole sprinkler system. No, you get manifolds and you add them, and you add the little lines, and you add the little heads to them. And we have classes for that, on-hand classes. And so our classes are going to be, this is our Master Gardener homepage. Our classes, like you probably signed up for this one, are going to be on the right side of the page, which is going to include our drip irrigation. And another thing that we have that's pretty new is the Drought button on the left side of the page that you might want to check out for a lot of information on drought. So are you overwatering? Well, you're probably not overwatering now because we're all on restrictions, but most of the landscape has been notoriously overwatered. So and you might have found this out now that we're on restrictions, that you cut back your water and maybe your turf isn't doing too good, but your other plants seem to kind of be doing okay. It's because most plants will do well with 20 to 40% irrigation than we were typically giving them. and consider the root system. So California's been big for the tall fescue lawns, the marathon grasses and things like that. And they have shallow roots. And that's why that once we cut back on watering, why they're not doing so well. Bermuda grass is a warm season grass, and their roots go really deep. And you know that if you've ever tried to take out a Bermuda lawn. So the roots of your trees and shrubs are usually within the 12 to 14 inches of the soil surface. So know when to water. No plant, native or not, is drought tolerant until it's established. And what is established? Established is when its roots have extended into the native soil. So here's another hint that when you plant, you don't want to add amendments to that planting hole. You want to backfill with the native soil because you want those roots to extend in the native soil. You don't want any extra stuff there. It will take your plants. If you add amendments, it's going to take them longer to establish. So it's really important. We get calls on the helpline a lot about I'm watering it every other day and my plants died. And it's because you're not watering new plantings in the right place. It's important to keep the root ball moist. So you're going to water on that root ball, the area that was in the pot when you planted it. It's water is, if you're watering outside of that area, the water isn't going into the root area. So for new plantings, you want to check your soil moisture frequently and irrigate when the top 2 inches are dry. So here we go. Before maturity, most plants are high water users. Trees take 3 to 5 years of regular water until they're established. I did mention earlier, you go maybe 3 to 6 months of a lot of watering a new tree. And after that time, you can usually cut back to half of what you were giving it until it's truly established. And check out the woo calls. That'll tell you what the water requirements are for your plants, for your trees. And also the select tree site, that's going to tell you what the water requirements are for your trees. So shrubs usually take a full year of regular water. And this is why we don't plant in the summer. Okay, now's the perfect time to plant. So new plantings need frequent water until the roots have grown into the surrounding soil. So summer, it's every 2 or 3 days. And you saw a lot of people, what they did was, you know, we got these water restrictions and they were like, oh, we've got to tear the lawn out and put in a drought tolerant lawn. They used a lot of extra water doing that. Now is the time to plant. Know that now our days are shorter. So plants only take up water during daylight hours. So you're saving water there. And also hopefully, well, yeah, it was 47 degrees when I went out for my walk this morning. So it is cooler. So there's not as much evaporation. So when your plants are established, that's when you're going to move your emitters out from the root ball area to cover the entire root zone. And if you're planting natives, instead of those little drip, drip, drip emitters, you're probably going to want to go with the micro sprinkler heads, because what happens with the drip is they saturate the soil, and most native plants aren't used to saturated soils. And don't depend on your sprinkler timer to tell you when to water. Water when your soil is dry. And here, how can you tell if your soil is dry? We're back to this. So schedule watering for early in the day when there's less evaporation and wind. Avoid watering in windy conditions, and avoid watering during the heat of the day. You might have heard that if you water when it's really hot out, it's going to burn your plants. It's not going to burn your plants, but you're going to be wasting all that water because it's just going to be evaporating into the air. And here's something that's kind of new, is the irrigation. If you have a newer irrigation timer, what some of these companies have done is they've decided that they're going to cut back your water in the fall and winter instead of in this, from what if you're doing like 10 minutes in the summer, they're going to cut it back to 5 minutes in the fall or winter. And this isn't right, because if it takes a gallon of water to get to the bottom of the roots in summer, it's still going to take a gallon of water to get to the bottom of the roots in fall and winter. But the difference is you're going to be spreading it out farther. You're not going to be watering as often. So water the same. Well, my water district just told us to cut back time again. But I guess that's hard telling people, instead of watering once a week to maybe watering every 10 or 12 days or something like that. Hard to keep track of. So anyway, you're going to put the same amount of water on it. You're just going to be spreading it out to a farther amount of time, less often. And routinely check your system, because all too often, this is, if you have hard water, your filters might block and you might not be getting any water to your plants. And also something that this could be my yard, because rodents really love these. They love to chew on these things. And also, if you're going to put in a drip system, if you've got 4 plants and you've got a manifold, by all means, get a manifold that's got more outlets than you need at the time. So let's say you have 4 plants, get a manifold that's got 6, because you can turn 2 of those off. And if you're like me, you're probably going to add different plants later on down the road. So those will come in handy. And remember that we live in a fire area. So no matter what the drought conditions are, make sure that the landscape around your home is free of dead grass and plant material. And I'm early here. And fire, I hope I didn't miss too much. I can go through some of my notes that I have here that I got on different trees that they're checking. But finally, avoid excess pruning, because it encourages new growth. Don't over fertilize, because fast growers require more water, and pull weeds because they may be using water that was intended for your garden. So gardening questions, we have the Master Gardener helpline, and you can send us emails, and with those emails you can send us pictures. We love pictures. So if you have a plant with a problem, it helps if you know what kind of a plant it is. We get a lot of questions, is my plant is this, and we have to kind of figure it out. So, but also as far as pictures, you want to include a picture, a close-up picture of the problem, maybe a faraway picture of the entire plant, and then a picture of around the base of the plant, because sometimes we can tell what's going on by looking at the base of the plant. And this guy's gonna, and this is the Conejo buckwheat that I talked about. That's a really neat plant. If you can find that plant, plant it. And it doesn't like summer water, so it does really good. But this is a picture I'm going to add into all my presentations, because it's the bunny reading the sign that says protect our wildlife. Okay, and that's about it. It's we always like getting out of class early, don't we?
Yes, if you have any questions, please write them in the chat box, and I will read them to Dani, and we will hopefully can answer them. In the meanwhile, use your phone to take a picture of this page, so that you have all of those resources.
And if you're wondering, we're actually doing research, or our farm advisors are doing research on different trees that are going to be good for a changing climate. And you might think that all the, well, I'll just go all natives, but the way things are going, it's the natives may not survive where they are. Species are moving up in elevation. So they're doing a lot of research with new plants that may not be native, that come from Australia, Oklahoma, Texas, Asia, California, Mexico. So keep an eye on that. We'll try, and when the research is completed, we'll get all that information out there on the the plants that are doing good, but so far it looks really good that we're finding plants that are going to hold up to the warmer weather and the water restrictions and the drought that we're having.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Take care. If you have any questions, call our helpline. Thank you, Dani, very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Good night, everybody.